Somebody's knocking at the door. Somebody's ringing the bell.
Yeah, I love the view.
Isn't that great?
It's one of my sort of golden memories of the 60s was, see where those people are coming out of the Albert Hall. It was just an open space outside the stage door. All the groups were there. Beatles, Stones, Yardbirds, Who, just hanging around, having a ciggy with Charlie Watts. How's it going, man? How are you? Where'd you get that shirt? Yeah. Carnaby Street. Oh yeah, for now I've got mine Fulham Road. That's the space, that's my golden space.
You want to sit down?
Yeah.
You are going to be here. Should we jump into it? So I have to start here because I'm the host. Here we go. Hi, I'm Morgan Neville. I'm director of Man on the Run, a film about Paul McCartney in the 70s, and I'm here with our subject, lucky to be joined by Paul McCartney himself. And I thought this was a chance to talk about some of the themes and ideas and history of this film.
Yeah.
And this period of time, the 1970s.
Yeah. Strange period.
So I'm wondering, before we began all this, almost 5 years ago, but even going back 5 or 10 years ago, how did you feel about this period of time?
Well, you know, as the film says, it was very difficult for me because, you know, the Beatles were such a big act and band that it's, how do you follow that? That was like the feeling that pervaded the decade. And it was a choice between giving up or continuing in music. And wasn't much of a choice really, because I knew I wanted to play music. But it was difficult. How to do that was not going to be easy. I mean, you know, one way would be to just ring up your famous friends and say, let's just make the greatest super group of all time. But for some reason, I resisted that. And in thinking about it, I cast my mind back to how did the Beatles do it? I just remembered that we started very little around it, you know, weddings. I kind of ignored the bit about it's a great way to do it, but hard.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, that's why your first shows you did was this famous van tour, right? Where you just hopped in a van and showed up at universities.
You know, you've got a captive audience, they're all there. And if you say, do you want to listen to some music? There's a good chance they might say, yeah.
Were those shows fun? They sound like...
Yeah, they were fun, but they were terrifying. Terrifying kind of fun.
Because you hadn't played in years at that point.
I mean, but actually playing music in a band is terrifying fun. Every time you get out and to do it, it's another time, and you're trying to get it right this time, and you're trying to be scintillate and be wonderful. And that means it's a little bit terrifying. You know, I don't think there's anyone just goes out and goes, this is me, you're gonna love me.
So when we started this film, I was wondering, why now? Why this film? And I wonder if it had something to do with your experience on Get Back. How creatively you were kind of firing on all cylinders at that time. And so when I think about this chapter, it's almost like, what happens the moment after that ends?
Yeah.
You know, what do you do with all that energy and all that creativity? That's kind of where we begin this film.
That's right, yeah. And the thing is, you keep going. And so this film is about how do you keep going? What do you do to keep going? And looking back at it, it is great for me because I think, wow, you know, so made some really mad decisions.
Yes.
You know, somebody's described the film as madcap. And it is a bit, you know, it's like, it's certainly not the safe route. You know, we just do whatever we feel like. And I think that's the wonder of it for me, because I'm thinking, well, I maybe wouldn't do that now. Why did I do it then? And I think it was just a sort of attitude of the times. I'm blaming the times, it wasn't me. And my desire to do something different.
But the thing I take away from it is don't second guess your own instincts.
Well, I suppose that's true, yeah. You know, I had an idea, oh yeah, that'd be great. We could do that. And then I follow it through. Luckily, there's no one there to say, no, don't do that. That's really too mad.
But I would say, you know, the same instinct maybe for you to record Mary Had a Little Lamb is the same instinct that had you record Mull of Kintyre.
No, you know, the thing is, I don't look at myself critically.
Yeah.
I'm not like a critic on my stuff. Afterwards, that happens.
Yeah.
Why did I do that?
Mary had a little lamb. Its fleece.
Well, I did it because I had a little daughter called Mary. At home, I would sing Mary Had a Little Lamb, you know, and she would love it. That was my audience. The follow-up thought was, well, let's make a record of it. And that's the thought somebody might not have had. Critics would think, well, why would you do that? You know, and it's great because they have to fill in answers. I don't, but they go. I like that one of their answers was, we got banned on the BBC for doing a record called Hi, 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 where there were drug references. So this was my answer. This is what the critics said. This was his way of getting back. They can't ban this one. I hadn't thought of that at all, but I like the thinking. But yet I just would do something like that and just follow it through. And only after I'd done it would I think about it. I don't really think about stuff.
That's good.
Which is okay, you know, it's my life and I can do what I want.
So where the film begins is this moment where you go to Scotland and Mary's just been born. Can you tell me a bit about Scotland and what your life was like there?
Yeah, I mean, when I first got it, it was on the advice of an accountant. Because when we first got money, the Beatles, we all sort of said, well, just stick it in the bank. And he said, no, you can't just do that. They have to do things with it. And we was very innocent to any of that and hated that idea, you know, because it's very complicated. Anyway, so he said, here's a Scottish farm that I found that I think you should buy. I go, why? Anyway, he persuaded me. So I said, okay, you know.
Did you go up and visit?
And I went up and visited, yeah. I was on my own at that time. I wasn't with Linda. So I was just looking at it a bit cynically and I thought, well, it's like it's bare. Tell you the truth, I wasn't that keen on it. But then when I met Linda, she said, you've got a farm in Scotland, haven't you? I said, well, yeah. You know, so I said, but, you know, she said, can we go? You know, I said, yeah. And then you start seeing it through her eyes and you go, oh, it's beautiful. It really is. It's not what I expected, but it's a beautiful place. Our big reason for doing it was that the business side of the Beatles was getting too much. And we wanted a way out because we were just starting a family. And so they'd be ringing us up and saying, we've got a meeting on Monday about the, you know, the so-and-so and so-and-so. Say, sorry, can't come to it. We're in Scotland, you know. Oh, okay. And it got us out of a lot of that heaviness. Yeah. So suddenly we found this freedom. So we were just like a couple of kids. It's like, oh, we could do that. And the place had a little dairy thing where they washed all the dairy equipment. It's like a galvanized tub. So we used to spend the whole evening filling that with the hot water. And then at the end of the evening, and we'd get up and get in it. That was our bath. This was more, we were making it all up. So there was a thrill of that.
Well, and I've seen the pictures of how much you ended up really working the farm.
Well, you know, I was actually just talking to someone who does that kind of thing in their life now. And we were saying what a great satisfaction it is. I always had a Christmas tree bought for me each year. And so I never really related to it. And now it was like, oh, I've got to get a Christmas tree. So there was a forest nearby and there was some young trees and I had an axe. So, you know, it was that kind of thing. So suddenly it was, yeah, creeping out of the forest late at night, you know, with our Christmas tree.
Yeah.
We needed a table. So I sort of figured out how I could make a table. Linda could cook and do all that. We could grow vegetables. And a lot of our friends and neighbors were kind of shocked. You know, you hadn't done all the classes and gone to all the shops and bought the stroller and all of that. We were making it all up. So she was in my jacket. This was the stroller.
Yeah, it's amazing.
We had to have a bed. I looked around the farm and there was these pallets
Yeah.
that they used to transport potatoes. So I put a couple of these together, angled this bit up, and made this bed. And we put, you know, all the nice clothing on it and pillows so she couldn't fall out. It was all very safe.
Yeah.
So that was it. And so with that, I had my guitar and I had a little piano. So I could, in between all of that, I could make music. And the music then got a kind of do-it-yourself vibe.
Don't cry. Daddy's gonna play you a lullaby.
And then I'd put a guitar on that. And then I put a bass on that. So I just made up a lot of tracks like that. I love to just make stuff up. It keeps me free.
I want to ask you a few questions about Linda. One thing I was really happy about in making this film was a chance to really get to know Linda and what she did. And I'm wondering, when she came into your life, what was that influence she had on you?
She was a freeing influence. She had grown up in a posh bit of New York. She was on track to become the sort of company wife.
Yeah.
But she didn't like that. She liked rock and roll. And she would do things like sneak out of the house late at night and drive into New York with a boyfriend.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of freedom in her thinking. So I think that's really was good for me.
Yeah, what did that teach you? What did she teach you in
Yeah,
that way?
not to be too uptight.
Yeah.
You know, in a situation like that, you lost your job, you can get uptight very easily, you know. One of my favorite expressions of hers was you'd be saying, you know, oh, I don't know, I'd love to do so-and-so, but I can't. And she'd say, it's allowed. It's like, all the weight just went off.
Yeah.
It's allowed. Yeah, of course it is. So those kind of things really impressed me. And I think probably made me think a lot more was allowed than was. Yeah. And she didn't want to do what her family had planned for her. So this madcap idea of having a baby with me, marrying me and going up to Scotland, it suited her.
Yeah.
And it suited me.
The fact that she was a mother and she was kind of a rock star mother, it wasn't like she or either of you ever outsourced anything about the family. The family was kind of the central thing that everything else was organized around.
It's true. I mean, I didn't know, like stuff I know now.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you get nannies and you get housekeepers and you get people to help you with it if you can afford it. We didn't know any of that. You know, it was me teaching, you know, cat. You know, I love doing that.
Oh yeah, and even the earliest tours, looking at the photos, seeing Linda changing diapers on the floor of the bus, you know, or whatever, we're all just going on this adventure together, you know.
Yeah.
I think the kids went on every tour you ever did.
Yeah. You know, we had various excuses in our minds because, you know, friends and neighbors would say, dragging the children around the world was how they put it. For us, it was taking our kids with us.
Yeah.
It wasn't dragging them anywhere, you know. And the philosophy we had was that if we're in Australia and the kids are home and somebody rings up and says, oh, I've got a terrible temperature or I've got flu or something, we wouldn't want to be in Australia. So we said, well, if that happens, at least we'll be near them. And then the other excuse was, well, it'd be good for their geography.
Yeah. And I think it was.
They know where Australia is.
Joe English told me a story that when you were touring America, he had a small garage apartment he was living in. You and Linda had said, hey, can we go stay at your house when we're playing in Atlanta rather than staying in a big fancy hotel.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we thought like that. It was just like, can we come to your house? Like you do with people, you know. It's how I was brought up.
Yeah.
Was in quite a compact little family house.
Yeah.
And I always liked that and thought it was good for everyone to do that. So,
Well, I know.
so Joe's place was that.
Yeah, he said
And
the
we
kids
loved it.
slept on the floor. He told me, you know, that it was just easy.
Probably put a, you know,
Yeah, something.
mattress
you know.
or
Yeah,
cushions or something down, yeah.
So, Wings. I was looking this up. You know, Wings was the, you know, third or fourth biggest band of the 1970s. And it was in making the film, I was just struck by just how popular Wings was in that day, because we don't think of it that way.
No, I know. It's. I think the Wings lives in the shadow of the Beatles. Naturally, when it's me, you think Beatles. You know, I've discovered doing interviews with younger kids. I'm going on about Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts. They're going, well, you know, I like Band on the Run. And you realize, wow, there's people out there who've grown up to that stuff. And when we do shows now, there's actually people in the audience doing the Wing side. And because it's a big, varied audience, and you've got old people and right down to little kids in between.
Yeah, I mean, I was one of those people. You know, I liked the Beatles. Yeah, I loved the Beatles, but Wings was the band who I could grow up with. That you were putting out albums that I was old enough to buy.
Yeah.
So for me, that was more my band.
Yeah. And I think this film, thinking about it, this really shows what went on. Because I think that's one of the things about Wings. It was a bit faceless. You heard about the Beatles going to America and on Ed Sullivan and were doing all of that. But as you say, the songs and the concerts were doing very well. But not everyone hears about the Kingdom show.
Wasn't that the Seattle Kingdom was supposed to be the biggest rock concert ever at that point?
But at the same time, as I say, it wasn't headline news. It was when I got busted and in Japan.
Well, yes.
That was headline news.
And then some. Yeah.
And then some.
You know, the first interview I did for this film was Denny Lane. You know, thank God I was able to speak to him just a few months before he passed away. And he was the one consistent member.
Well, he was kind of what I intended, that, you know, there would be me and another lead singer. And then with Linda, we could harmonize. And so it was starting to get to be what I was imagining. But he was, you know, really, he was good. Good guitar player, good singer, and a nice guy. And he stayed that. He remained that way. He got it. He got what we were trying to do.
I mean, the other member was Linda the whole time.
Yeah.
And when I think about the sound of Wings, I think about that vocal sound that's, you know, really kind of the three of you.
I know, and it's that's what I mean about the film. It's like I think back to that period now and listen to the music, and I hear these beautiful harmonies coming from Linda, and I think, wait a minute, there was no autotune. We didn't have any of that's real.
Yeah.
She hadn't had any lessons, and it was just a love of singing.
Do you love me like you know you ought to do?
I liked her voice. Her style was not operatic. It was not blues.
Or is this the only thing you want me for?
It's also a musical sounding board for you too.
Yeah.
You know, that she was kind of your first audience in some ways.
She was a great sounding board. You know, if she liked it, it was probably okay.
So I know early on with Wings particularly, and even with Ram and McCartney 1, you had said that you were trying to not write Beatles songs in a way. And I'm wondering what that means.
Yeah, the idea was if we're trying to form a new group and we're trying to get people to not associate us just with the Beatles, and it's got to be this identity that's Wings. So that's when I started like doing Band on the Run and Jet and stuff like that. that didn't really sound too Beatley.
There's a point in the film where you talk about politics and songwriting, and you said, some people can't do that, some people don't want to do that.
I'm just not as good at doing that. It's not my style. And I think you have to realize that some people, it's very much their style. I think John was much better at it than I was. But I don't think he felt any more than I did. He was just better at translating it. So, we discovered things together, but actually putting it in song, it suited John's style more than me.
So the name of this movie is Man on the Run, which, it seemed appropriate to me, and I'm just wondering your feeling of why it felt appropriate to you, of, trying to escape the shadow of the Beatles is part of the story.
Yeah, I think, we were on the run, not on the run from the law, but on the run from ourselves and our situation. So I think it works as a title. I certainly was a man on the run at that time.
Well, this might be a good moment, because after that, I know you started thinking about touring, doing bigger and bigger tours and having the material for that. And I pulled this out of the archive. This Venus and Mars was the album where you, from what I understand, were thinking about performing live.
Yeah, we did. We did it a few times live.
Yeah.
It opens out forever and ever.
And these are the songs on the album.
Yeah.
But I see a song like Rock Show, which you opened some concerts with.
Yeah.
Too. I mean, it feels like it's written to be performed.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was. I got a bit embarrassed by it, I must say. Now, I said this because a couple of the members of my band, my current band, said, we should do Rock Show. I go, I'd like to, but some of the lyrics seem to me a bit embarrassing.
Do you want to read a couple or not?
Don't need to be embarrassed, yeah. What's that man wheeling across the stage? Yeah. It looks a lot like the one used by Jimmy Page. Yeah. Looks like a relic from a different age. Where are you going with this? Could be. Yeah, if there's a rock show. Oh my God. I mean, they said no, they love it because they grew up with it. They're younger than I am. They're long hair at Madison Square. I think I mentioned an axe too, instead of a guitar, which I was a bit embarrassed.
One other, I have some of my props here, but another thing you did a lot of in this time was travel to record. So you went to Nashville and did Junior's Farm.
Yeah.
But Venus and Mars, you went to New Orleans. I have this scrapbook that I believe Linda made of photographs.
Yeah. Linda did this, yeah. Yeah. No, we had a great time. And there was a thing at that time. Oh, where's that T-shirt? I like that. Yeah, there was a thing at the time where people were recording in strange places. Like, for instance, the Stones were recording in the south of France. That was a tax decision, but I didn't know that. So I thought, wow, that's kind of exotic,
But what did that do for the music, do you think?
I think it made us look at it from a different point of view. Certainly, if you were in Nashville, you were going to lean towards a country-sounding thing because it was on the radio, it was all around.
Yeah.
But I think it was more just the freedom of being somewhere else.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the sad things about looking back on this, so many of these people have passed, like, oh my God, he's not here, he isn't.
I know you're a fan of Fela Kuti and went to go see him, but
Yeah.
I know people were afraid you might be doing an album stealing the sound of.
Yeah, well, he was.
He was.
Fella was very worried. I got there, and we were really just going somewhere different. And I had a bunch of songs. I had Band on the Run written on it, and I had it on a cassette, which was stolen, mugged late at night. So I knew what we were going to do, and it wasn't. I thought there might be a little bit of atmosphere Lagos would bring. I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know what Lagos was. The first thing I saw was a newspaper thing. Fela Kuti accuses Paul McCartney of stealing black man's music. So I went, oh no. So I got his number and rang him up. I said, look, I'm not doing that at all. I said, come around to the studio and I'll prove it to you. So he did. He came round with a big entourage, many wives,
Yeah.
and many guys and mates. They all filled the studio kind of thing, and he came in the control room. So I started playing him some of the stuff we've been working on, which was nothing like his thing.
No, I don't think you hear Band on the Run, you would ever think that it was recorded in Africa.
No. There are a couple of things that have got a little bit of percussion on them, like Mamunia and stuff, whatever. But I persuaded him that, and so we became really good friends. I went out to his club, the African Shrine.
Oh, yeah.
Which was
Famous club.
I mean, cut a long story short, I wasn't going to smoke any pot, but he gave some to Ginger Baker, and he said, Ginger Baker, the only man I know never refuse a smoke. So I thought, oh shit, I'm the guy who's refused to smoke. So I said, go on then. I had it. Well, I totally got blasted and really was just out of it, and got pretty nervous and paranoid and everything. And we were sitting at the side of the stage and his band came on and then they started playing. And it was such a relief to hear this incredible music.
Yeah, incredible stuff.
And live, right there. So I ended up just weeping. It just was tears of joy, you know. I'd never heard anything like that. And so we became very good friends.
And you had this famous party in Hollywood, too, at the end of a tour, right? This giant Hollywood party I've seen. You know,
like everyone was there. We managed to spend all the profit off the tour on that one party. Hey, looking back, it's like, but you know what? It worked. All these madcap ideas somehow worked. They were sort of so mad, and so that the one thing it gave you all the time, even though you were doing this crazy stuff, was freedom.
But to me, it's the big theme of the film is just freedom. You know, the sense of trying to not have to care about expectations, about history, about
it was like
that
suddenly
instinct.
it comes a point where you suddenly think I'm grown up. You know, because a lot of the time you think, well, I've got to listen to what everyone else tells me. And I mean, coming in here, the Royal College of Music, you know, I was a bit, oh God, what have I done wrong, you know? No, I think, you know, you just reached a point, and we reached it when we went to Scotland, where we were grown up. I was now like a father.
Yeah.
You were grown up, but you were free, so you could go places like New Orleans and learn, you know, just off the grooves and the musicians. It didn't always end up, in fact, it hardly ever ended up in our music, but the atmosphere did, the attitude to just, we love music, and that's all that matters.
You know, I think of the film as being kind of two love stories. One is you and Linda, and one is you and John. There's an arc to your relationship through this decade.
Yeah, when we first broke up, good old John, he was like slinging missiles at me. He was just writing songs against me. How do you sleep at night? You know, and I was thinking, okay, thanks, you know. This is John. You know, if he doesn't like someone, he's going to sling arrows at you. And knowing that I can't really effectively sling back stuff, because I'm just not that good at that. It's not my thing, you know. In the beginning, it was quite sort of hurtful, obviously. And it was the business thing. They were trying to stay with this guy who we knew was trying to rob the company. And it was like I was the only one who'd seen that the emperor wasn't wearing any clothes. But then they started to realize that I was right about Klein, and they went off him. And then they so it was healing itself, as you said. And eventually we were actually able to talk to each other, instead of, you. It was more chatting about what we were doing, And John had Sean, so he was now a father of a young baby. So, I would ring him up and we'd talk about kids and sort of domestic things. And I started making bread and it was getting pretty good, And I started talking to him. He said, oh yeah, I'm making bread. Oh. So that was like, the things that we had in common were just ordinary little domestic things. So somehow that was peaceful. And it was nice that we had that in common. And we weren't fighting anymore. So I would go and visit him and we had quite a bit of interaction, and then the same with George and Ringo. It was all getting much nicer. And that was the only consolation when John got killed, was I thought, thank God, we got it back together. I don't know what I would have thought if we hadn't, and we were still warring, and he got killed. I think, I lost my chance, to make peace.
Do you know today's the anniversary?
Oh my God. I don't keep anniversaries like that. It's today, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. What does that make you feel? It makes me feel that the guy who did it is still in New York and he's in a jail and he's still knocking around. I mean, it's
hard to make sense of,
You can't make sense. The world is a very sort of bizarre place, as we all know. But something like that happens, and it's like, for what reason? And you can't work out. The guy himself, I don't think, had much of a reason. I mean, terrible, just robbed the world of this crazy genius.
I talked about the film being Man on the Run because you were running, but it seemed, why I wanted to end the film where I did is it felt like you stopped running in a way and just became, you could just be Paul then. You didn't have to be Wings. Wings never played another concert after that, that it was kind of, for all the pain of that, it was the end of something. I don't know if that resonates for you or not.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's it. I was wondering what to do after the greatest job in the world for me ended. I thought of something to do. We went and did it. It was madcap, but we did it. And once we'd done it, we proved it. I suppose all I was trying to do was prove that there was life after the Beatles. And that involved a lot of other things. It involved family, it involved Linda, it involved the members of Wings. And together we went and did this thing that was kind of almost impossible to do. But somehow we did it.
Yeah.
And we had a laugh doing it. But I think that's one of the nice things I say to people about this film, that I don't think people know these stories. People, what? You were in jail in Japan for 9 days? I didn't know that.
I heard your grandson said that.
They don't know that,
It's not the thing you bring up all the time,
Not really, no.
So what was your experience of watching the film?
You always say with this kind of a documentary, it's like drowning. But it's not drowning, but your life was flashing by in this movie. Mine was. And it's like having the old time scrapbook. Oh my gosh, we did that, we did that, we did that. I found it like amazingly interesting, amazingly truthful, amazingly mad of what I was getting up to. And I can only blame me, because it wasn't Linda's fault or Denny's fault. I was just the lunatic in charge, you know. There's so much in it.
Yeah.
It's one of these things you have to watch a few times.
Yeah. You know, the line that stays with me is Stella talking about what a kind of happy, magical time that was for her, too. That it just gives me goosebumps when I think about it.
Yeah, well, that's what we were trying to do. You know, Linda and I genuinely loved our kids. And so no matter what was going on, they were the focus. And to hear that they remember their childhood with happiness that's the best thing, you know. It's the best reward you can get as a parent. To hear that you did okay.
I think you did okay.
We did okay.
Someone knocking at the door, somebody ringing the bell. Someone's knocking at the door, somebody's ringing the bell. Do me a favor, open the door and let him in. Ooh, yeah. Someone's knocking at the door, somebody's ringing the bell. Someone's knocking at the door, somebody's